Another installment of Institute for Supply Management's LinkedIn Live series, ISM World 2023, The People You'll Meet. My name is Dan Zeiger, and I'm a senior writer and copy editor for Inside Supply Management magazine. That's ISM's member publication, and we're excited to have you as a part of today's event, which is the third in this series. Once again, we're going to spend time with a session presenter, one of the people that you'll meet at our conference, which is this May in Grapevine, Texas, just outside of Dallas. The next 38 minutes will be an interactive experience, so feel free to like and share. And today you'll learn a little bit more about our conference as well as our guest. Before we get started, please feel free to comment in the chat feature on where you're joining us from today. And we'd love to know if you've already registered for ISM World 2023. And you can also ask questions throughout today's event, and we'll be sure to address them by the end. This is a preview of one of our many breakout sessions over the 3 days of ISM World 2023, where the supply management profession will convene deep in the heart of Texas. And that session is titled Understanding and Engaging Veteran-Owned Businesses for Supplier Diversity Programs. And we're going to chat with one of the presenters today. Veteran-owned businesses are important suppliers with unique strengths. And research shows that veterans are a growing percentage of U.S. business owners, and they employ millions of workers. Their military experience offers them unique experiences and insights that can benefit buyers. But how can procurement practitioners most effectively identify and engage with these organizations? Luckily for us, I know just who to ask about that. So let's say hello to John Perez. He's a CPSM and a CPSD, and he's head of military and veterans affairs at Johnson & Johnson. And there he leads military-connected programming and has held previous roles in procurement, supply management, and acquisition and divestiture. And he's also served as a U.S. Army officer in various cross-functional roles, including multiple deployments in Iraq. So, John, thank you. It's great to have you here today. Before we get started, I know you're a procurement practitioner who likes to network and talk to other people and discuss the profession. Just talk about what it was about ISM World 2023 that made it important for you and your co-presenter, Misty Fox, we must note, to bring your message there. And just as a practitioner, what's the value of attending a professional conference like this?
Well, one, thanks, Dan, for having me. It's great to see you and great to see everybody from around the world. I'm actually really excited to see so many folks from different countries. And I think this session is just as relevant to folks outside the U.S. as inside, right? We often operate with global supply chains and global supplier bases, so it's relevant to everybody. It doesn't matter that it's focused on the U.S. Armed Forces and veteran-owned businesses within the U.S. This is relevant for everybody, so great to see that. And listen, it's great to be a supply management professional. I've been to past ISM annual events. I've been to local ones within my own chapter that I belong to here in the state of New Jersey. And they are great experiences to network with others, to learn more about our profession, and to share more, right? So much as you learn so much by even trying to present on something. You become an even deeper expert on it. So it's just a wonderful experience. I'm really looking forward to it. This coming ISM World, I think, will be another great one. It's always great to be in the Republic of Texas, and spend a little time down there with so many of our friends and colleagues and peers. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss the topic of your and Misty's session. You've written for our magazine in the past. I'll discuss a specific excerpt in a little bit, but you've written in the past that veteran-owned businesses are an often overlooked group, but they can add tremendous value. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that and just give us a little preview of your session?
Absolutely. Listen, veterans in the United States, right? So it's a large segment of the population, but also a small segment. So there's about 18 million veterans in the United States, but veterans disproportionately go into entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of different research that Misty will share certainly to kick off of our session of why is that the case, right? Veterans have this great learning agility. They have great decisiveness. They've operated successfully in really dynamic, incredibly challenging experiences, especially for U.S. Armed Forces veterans over the last 20 years in deployments like myself, deployments to Iraq or to Afghanistan or to other conflict zones. And so the skills that they're learning through military experience are then being translated as they go and pursue entrepreneurship for that next part of their career after military service. Also, really importantly in the U.S., we've got some great workforce policies. Most people have heard of the GI Bill historically. So veterans, especially since the creation of the all-volunteer force, they actually have higher levels of educational attainment than do non-veterans. So they're taking great, challenging experiences from the military, great education experiences, and then they're going and forming businesses, and they're going and being an integral part of our economy and worldwide, right? So hundreds of thousands of veteran-owned businesses exist within the U.S. They touch every different category that we as procurement, supply management professionals might want to experience, but they look a little different, just like other areas of supplier diversity, right? You have to have some specialized knowledge to really best identify and then engage with successfully these different populations. And the veteran population is no different than the special things that you'll need to think about when you're engaging with a woman-owned business, or with a Hispanic-owned business within the U.S., or many of the other ways that we think about diversely owned and led businesses.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, some of the training and the educational benefits. Yeah. At the risk of dating myself, I remember the U.S. Armed Forces ad campaigns from a bygone era. Be all you can be. It's a great place to start. We're not a company, we're your country. And the pitch was, hey, come learn technical skills that can help you in your business career. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to give some insight. I'd love to know, what did your military experience, how did that give you, unique preparation that you can apply to procurement and supply management in your career?
Yeah, and listen, that was a great slogan, and I believe the Army is bringing it back this year. So I think it's a great one. I know there were some other iterations over the last decade or so, but I think that's a great slogan, and I think it's really true that you can go and be the best of yourself through military experience. For myself, right, I was a business undergrad major, and then really wanted to go into the service, and knew as soon as I graduated from university with my bachelor's degree that I would go and on active duty in the U.S. Army, and I would and likely deploy. So for me, I learned more. I often say I learned more in that first year of active duty than I did in my time as an undergraduate. Why? Because I was put in really challenging roles very early on, with a tremendous amount of responsibility as a 21-year-old junior Army officer about to deploy to Iraq. Just so much responsibility, and in an environment that was constantly changing and so different. So this idea of learning agility, can you throw someone into a new environment and demand that they're successful really quickly? That is a skill to go and learn to be successful in new environments. And the best way to go learn a skill is often doing it. And you have to do that within the armed forces, in particular in deployed environments. So for me, learned so much in different functional areas, learned how to deal with different external stakeholders, right? It's not all internal focusing, right? It's how are you delivering, to the community that, in this case, or in the environment that I was deployed in. So you're learning so much, and you're learning external, how to engage externally. I was able to take that back to supply management when I was going and then responsible for different category areas. Hey, I've never been the lead I've never had experience within pharmacovigilance and medical safety, which was one of the categories that I had previously been responsible for within my time at Johnson & Johnson, but was able to really understand, okay, how do I go be successful in this brand new environment? What are my plans, 30, 60, 90 days to go and be successful? And you see that in veteran-owned businesses as well. Right, you can trust with a veteran-owned business that because it's diversely owned and led by someone who's had this similar experience, that you can throw very different things, right? Changes to your supply requirements, changes to your business, and that they're going to go and be successful in that and really deliver to your business need. It's really a unique early in career opportunity to go serve in the military, because you're getting all of these diverse, very challenging experiences really quickly and really early in your career.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the magazine article that I'm going to cite that you've written multiple for us, we've been blessed with that. And the one that I'm going to cite specifically is from our December 2020 issue. And you wrote that military and their spouse, you've also talked about their spouses. That's an important dynamic to discuss as well. Military and military spouse-owned businesses and entrepreneurs, you quote, have a rapidly evolving and growing support system of government and nonprofit organizations. And many of those organizations offer programming about topics like education for aspiring business owners, funding through grants and other financing mechanisms, and marketing and promotional support during the development and beyond. We discussed last week in preparation for this, we talked about the unique ecosystem and support system that military-owned businesses and suppliers have access to. Makes them unique and provides some sort of a competitive advantage that a buyer can tap. Just to elaborate on that a little bit.
No, for sure. Listen, I think first it's important to start with, there's some needs that diverse suppliers in general have, and it's true also for veteran-owned businesses, right? So we often will hear things, access to capital, right? I think everybody who's engaged with diverse suppliers often hear that's the first, if you go as a diverse entrepreneur or business owner, what's the first thing that they'll talk about? Access to capital. Second thing they'll often talk about is access to human capital, people and social capital, right? Different networks. It's true also in the veteran space, especially if you think of a career of a person who served in the military. They might have had a dozen or 20 different duty stations over that time. It's hard to form deep social networks when you're moving every 3 years, especially when many networks are geographically based. They'll also talk about, hey, how do we go get support, right? And every diverse area will have a slightly different ecosystem. The veteran-owned and military spouse-owned space is very similar in that. And you can really think of it in sort of two paths. One would be government support ecosystem, a lot of it through SBA, Small Business Administration, which has some wonderful programming for veteran entrepreneurs. And then on the private side, and I think we've been blessed in the United States to really have such an engaged overall national community that realizes that it wants to support the armed forces and it wants to support the veteran population as well. So you'll see across the life cycle of entrepreneurship, right? From an idea stage to, hey, I've got an idea, I formed a business, now I'm in the growth stage. There's some just wonderful organizations like the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University, where my co-presenter, Misty Colleague, is the Director of Entrepreneurship and Small Business Programs. There are certifying organizations like the National Veteran-Owned Business Association, the National Veteran Business Development Council. And there's others that will focus in really smaller areas, more niche areas within a state. For example, in the state of New Jersey, there's the New Jersey State Veterans Chamber of Commerce. And what's important for a supplier manager is to realize that, or supply manager, is to realize that there is a diverse and different ecosystem for each area of diversity. In the veteran space, it's very rapidly changing. The way the government is handling some of the certification programs, for example, just switched from the VA, the Veterans Administration, managing it to SBA, the Small Business Administration, managing it. Right? That impacts hundreds of thousands of veteran-owned businesses. So for a supply manager who wants to effectively engage, you really need to be able to understand the unique needs of each population. And that's one of the things that our panel will talk about and give some access to as well, to say, here are the leading organizations that you as a supply manager really need to know about if you want to effectively engage in this population, to source potential new suppliers and then to engage most effectively with them. But it's great to know that there is this robust ecosystem that's just doing some wonderful things for this population. And it's why we're seeing such tremendous success for veteran-owned businesses across the United States.
Yeah. We were discussing right before we came on here, with Haley and Robin behind the scenes. You kind of have a unique position at Johnson & Johnson. You don't see a lot of that in companies, a position that is, responsible for engaging with military and veterans. Could you just discuss that? And, do you think that this could be a growing trend, where, big organizations and companies recognize that this is an area we need to tap?
Yeah, so I'm the head for military and veterans affairs at Johnson & Johnson. The way to think about that is I help bring together all of the activities we do that somehow touches the armed forces community. So that's things like, how do we engage with our veteran-owned business suppliers, to how do we bring in talent from veterans, members of the National Guard or Reserve, or military spouses, to philanthropically how we're engaged, to how are we serving this population as patients and customers. And the idea is, if you think about it sort of across all of the functional domains of a company and all the business units of a company, you can be better in all those areas because you have one team really thinking about it holistically. There are other companies that have this role. It is one that has absolutely proven its success within J&J. We're really proud to be a leader in the space across all of those different sub-functional areas. And for us, it's really important. We've got at Johnson & Johnson a tremendous legacy of support to this population and focus on the population, all the way dating back to the Spanish-American War in 1898, when the company held positions for employees who volunteered to serve during the Spanish-American War. So we've got a tremendous over 120-year legacy of supporting the population. But what we're seeing is that's more than just support, that there's a direct business benefit to going and actively engaging and thinking about this population. Talent is a great example of it, that we see veterans perform incredibly well within Johnson & Johnson. There's a competition for this talent across all industry. But we're seeing that veterans within J&J perform incredibly well. They stay longer, they get promoted, and they're just great assets to the company. And it's the same for how we engage with veteran-owned business suppliers, right? Mm-hmm. So we have hundreds of these veteran-owned or military spouse-owned businesses, and they're really delivering for us to help have a world-class supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Any anecdotes or stories that you can? I mean, the first one that comes to my mind. Obviously, the distribution of the vaccines, there might be some dynamics with that whole distribution and logistics effort where you can bank on some military principles or military philosophies that might have aided, specifically in that endeavor. Any examples like that come to mind where you can look back and think, yeah, the military principles or the military lessons really aided us in our procurement efforts there?
Yeah, I think sort of across the board on talent in particular, it's so easy to point to colleagues that really have said, hey, these were things that we learned in the military, and here's how we've been successful. On the supplier side, again, hundreds of different veteran-owned businesses. I think we've had a great relationship with one of our trade customization partners within our consumer health business. Right, so trade customization, it's sort of the displays that you might see within grocery stores for some of the things that you may have historically thought of Johnson & Johnson for. Right, that's a long-standing relationship. But when you talk to leaders within that business and others, they'll talk about how that formative time as a service member really has enabled their subsequent success as a business owner. Why? Because they're not really fazed by rapidly changing business situations and environments, right? They've dealt with rapidly changing situations. They understand how to go and learn in that new situation and become really successful really quickly. The other thing that I love from them, it's this idea of continuous learning, right? The military has a culture of after-action reviews. We finished doing an exercise or a deployment or some other activity. Let's stop and be systematic about how we think about doing better the next time. Right. So let's think about things that we did really well and we need to sustain. Let's think about things we need to improve. But it's a culture of learning and not punishing people for decisions that didn't go the wrong way. Ethical things are non-negotiable, right? But learning from mistakes and from challenges is just part of the military culture. It's a wonderful culture of learning. And I'd love to see that of my colleagues within Johnson & Johnson. Know that when you bring someone from this community onto your team, doesn't matter if they're the leader or just another team member, that they're going to bring this culture of learning and help inculcate that within the team at Johnson & Johnson. I could think of hundreds of my colleagues that have brought that in on the talent side. So it's really been a wonderful experience to be in this role, to be closer to all of that and to see and hear the stories on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Well, you touched on this a little bit earlier. I mean, it's an opportunity to elaborate on it a little bit. I mean, obviously, with any other segment of the supplier population or business population, there are unique dynamics and traits and systems. I guess if I'm a procurement professional, what do I need to know before I start to go out and engage with military-owned businesses? Where should I start?
Yeah, I think the first thing to recognize is this is a population that this is an acquired form of diversity. You're not born a member of some military caste within the United States, and you're definitely going in, right? It's a thing that you volunteer for now in the United States. So you're really getting diversity of backgrounds, right? And that's some of the more traditional ways we'll think about it, right? Race, ethnicity, gender. The U.S. Armed Forces and the veteran population represents the diversity of the U.S. So you're getting a very broad cross-section of the population. Then you're getting special acquired skills as a result, right? You can trust that you're getting leadership skills, learning agility, self-efficacy. You're getting a highly educated population, right? So you know that you're drawing from a great pool. The second thing to realize is there's this great ecosystem, and I think this is where you really start. And how do I start as a supply manager? Mm-hmm. There's this wonderful ecosystem that's been created by the federal government, by state governments, and then by the private sector. And there's ways to go and engage with these different folks. I think if I were a brand new supply manager, brand new, taking over a totally new category, and I'm sort of assessing the marketplace, how would I start for this population? It would be connecting to some of those leading organizations like the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, or some of the certifying organizations. And IVMF, which is what we refer to the Institute for Veterans and Military Families as, they created a coalition for veteran-owned businesses that includes Johnson & Johnson and a number of other leading companies. And we all really get together to do exactly what it sounds like, to support veteran-owned and military spouse-owned businesses. We share best practices. IVMF does a great job of connecting to potential suppliers or connecting to the broader ecosystem. So I can tell you there are times within Johnson & Johnson when someone who's a category manager or category director and has a specific need for their category and says, gosh, I don't know where to source this. I kind of went to my normal channels for whatever my category is. I went to my kind of sub-industry bodies or my commodity bodies, but I'm just not seeing the veteran-owned businesses. Where can I go? And it's reaching out to this wonderful ecosystem and really leading organizations to say, hey, I'm responsible for this category. I'm looking for some suppliers. Can you help me identify some of them? And that's what these organizations are great at doing. Mm-hmm. If you're further along as a supply manager, right, and you have a few different, let's say, preferred companies that are veteran-owned businesses, similarly, I think that ecosystem is a wonderful way to start to say, okay, great. We've got a relationship here. How do we make it a strategic relationship? What do we need to do that helps enhance this supplier, right? Whether that's, send in your, a Lean Six Sigma expert to go and help do some process excellence work, right? Or talk to them about, how they approach their capital needs. You can start with these wonderful organizations. You can develop things internally, but I think it's great in this space that there are so many wonderful organizations. There's not an absence of support for this population.
Yeah. Well, we've been discussing, and you mentioned a lot of organizations, a lot of acronyms, a lot of alphabet soup, as one of my high school teachers used to say. I would imagine the first thing that comes to a lot of people's mind is that, okay, we're dealing with a lot of those organizations and they are the federal government and there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of paperwork. And, is this going to be more trouble than it's worth if I were to, go down? Can you just talk about the process? Is this something that has been streamlined in recent years? Is this becoming easier, for procurement professionals to tap if they want to go down that road?
I think there are in the area of supplier diversity in general, right? There is a lot of complexity. The military and the veteran ecosystem, no different from having this alphabet soup. It's certainly true. With that said, there's very clear leading organizations. So you definitely see, a few leading and then a huge tail of other organizations to go and support. And I think it's great that at this specific, this specific panel, my co-presenter is at by far the leading organization. So that is a great first step. But then, like anything else, right, you do need to go and sometimes get specialized. That's no different than than the experience of any supply manager of, hey, there's some big macro things we need to be aware of. There's some great large organizations we could work with. But as I get into the needs for the specific commodities I'm responsible for, I need to go and really and work closely with those those organizations that are really specialists. In this space, I would say it's no different, right? There's some great national organizations that are extremely easy to work with that don't cost your organization more to engage with, which is incredibly important. You can start there. And then as you really get into very niche needs, of course, you're going to go and find others. But it should never dissuade anybody from looking at this area of supplier diversity, dissuade them from going and pursuing organizations here. There's some wonderful national groups that are very large. They're the true clearinghouses. And then they can direct you as it becomes more appropriate to get much more niche. And the worst thing would be overlooking this population. And sort of a fear of, gosh, I'm not sure if I can figure out how to navigate it. Why? Because you're overlooking a huge percentage of the U.S. population. And as we talked about, a percentage of the population that's outperforming non-veterans. When you hold everything else equal, and the only thing you change is, did you serve in the military? Did you have that professional experience or not? You're seeing them outperform. Higher levels of educational attainment, more likely to start a business, more likely to be successful as a small business owner. You want that in your supplier base, and overlooking it for sort of fear of, gosh, it's just hard to navigate is absolutely not an excuse that any of us within the profession could ever use. And again, it's great that there's some wonderful national organizations out there that are just doing such impressive, incredible work, like the Institute for Veterans and Military Families.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time here. I got a couple questions left. Just one of the things that we're talking about this specific segment, veteran-owned businesses, but I would imagine that you've gained a broader philosophical view of supplier diversity, and a lot of companies have learned, okay, if we are intentional about it and just don't see it as checking a box, we can tap a lot of innovation, and it's just smart business. Just talk about, I imagine you've gotten a lot of, philosophical lessons throughout your career, just about, the benefits of supplier diversity in general and how that, can benefit businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we go through and we start, right? It's about diverse, owned, and led. Mm-hmm. And that's great, right? And that's an important thing. And often the owner / top leader for an organization, right? The values of that person, the mindset will permeate through the organization. What you often see for these organizations, it's the overall employee base tends to look a little different, right? So veteran-owned businesses more likely to have more veteran employees than a non-veteran-owned business, right? Mm-hmm. And so the great thing is that you may not interact with the CEO, the owner of a company, one of your suppliers that frequently. Maybe you'll have some top to tops, right? But you might be dealing with some of the dozens of other employees that are there. And certainly the sort of the operational people that are engaging with that supplier, probably not ever dealing with the CEO, or maybe relatively rarely. But it's great to know that the rest of the employee base is taking on that, and they're reflecting that diversity as well. And what are you getting out of that, right? You want teams that don't just all have the same background. They don't all, we often say, sort of look and sound alike, but it's also, do they have different professional experiences? The veteran population, right, it's very clear that what makes them diverse, it's the fact that they had a different professional experience than did most Americans, right? Very few Americans go into the armed forces.
Yeah.
So you're really bringing this diverse industry and often diverse functional background. That diversity of thought is so incredibly important to then go and driving innovation, driving efficiency and effectiveness, right? You're thinking differently about how you're going to approach problems. That's just so important to bring. And I think sometimes we kind of default to, well, hey, I need a certain percentage of my spend going with a diverse supplier. That's really not the right way to think about it. That may be important for lots of reasons, but why is it, the number one reason it's important is you're bringing diversity into your overall team as you think about your supplier base, and then you're driving greater innovation, you're driving greater efficiency and effectiveness over time.
Yeah. Well, hey, John, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. I learned a lot. I know our viewers have, and we'll look forward to seeing you and Misty at your session at ISM World 2023. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for everybody for joining.
Yeah.